Good afternoon. Today is February the 18th. Chris and I here coming to you live from our offices in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So today we're going to be talking about clarity and how clarity and commitment go together. Anything you want to share here, Chris, as we kick things off? Anything that needs to be clarified before we get into clarity?
Right. That's a good lead in. No, but the exactly that point is, if we don't have clarity, how do we know what to commit to? Right. So that's kind of the primary message today. And we're sticking with that theme from our last episode where we're talking about Lencioni's five dysfunctions of a team from author Patrick Lencioni, for those that don't know. So yeah, let's jump into it.
So how do you have clarity on a faith walk?
That's the interesting part. I think as faithful people, I think we are seeking clarity with a lower expectation for clarity sometimes. Like, it may never become fully clear, but faith is not necessarily about always being perfectly clear. So there
Yeah.
is a tension between what we create in work and in process as people, but also how it lines up with faith. I love that you named it right
Because
out
yeah,
of the gate.
there's some times when I'm like, okay, I'm looking at something, and I could argue both sides of the coin. I'm like, okay, this is what I believe God called us to, but
Yep.
I could just as easy argue the other side that it doesn't make sense. There's stuff that still need clarity on, but sometimes you have to trust God and you have to step out and then create clarity as you go, if you will. So
That's right.
you
That's
want to
right.
read the scripture verse for today, Chris?
I would love to. Proverbs 29, verse 18, where there is no revelation, the people cast off restraint, but happy is he who keeps the law. Um, I love this verse, and it actually connects to something I was studying just last week, and I spent some time speaking about revelation in church on Sunday, where some of this clarity and walk in faith, as you've named, David, is sometimes the expectation of revelation. God is always revealing new things to us. God is always at work. So sometimes we're limited by our desire to want to see a specific revelation, and we might miss the real revelations that are happening right in front of us. It's kind of some of the idea that I was talking about and sharing about on Sunday. But how it connects to this, I think, is the fact that you know revelation comes with clarity, and clarity comes with commitment and alignment, and then it's how we kind of walk into it together. And sometimes commitment through clarity is just a commitment to be in faith with one another, right?
Mhm.
A commitment to not know what is around the next corner.
Yeah, and sometimes you have your vision on a future goal, if you will, and a group of people as they are working towards clarity. That's when the revelation can happen, and that
Mhm.
can be a beautiful thing. If I was just thinking of, I think it's John Maxwell's quote. He talks about some of his best thinking is done by other people, and it's creating that atmosphere of ideas or just a conversation that happens, and then out of that everybody brings their piece in, and out of that is where you have the clarity where the whole team can then move forward together.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that more even with us at Blessings of Hope. We've been going through this work of EOS and level 10 meetings and different things, and creating that space for that conversation does bring a lot of that team clarity. So
Mhm.
you're right, that Maxwell quote fits perfectly.
Yeah. So when you think about clarity, uh, what one thing about clarity is, as people are clear on where they're going, they're usually more committed on helping to get there, and the bigger buy-in, if you will.
Hmm.
Uh, and sometimes, as a visionary leader team, it's like, okay, this is where we think we're going, and then it's like, okay, well, how do you bring clarity around something that you're shooting for, but you haven't fully identified the whole target yet, and then bringing that back to the team, and okay, this is where we think we're going, and we're going to start heading that direction, and sometimes there's some unknowns that pop up that you have to deal with in that process. So
Yeah.
But
I
in that process, I think if we can stay open and just have the dialogue as it comes up, it definitely helps to bring clarity in that process.
I think a big part of leadership in that process is the humility enough to say that just because I visioned this as the goal and the outcome doesn't mean we can't potentially have to move off of that. That these things that are coming in from the outside, these forces that we weren't expecting and we weren't seeing, that they aren't there in order to help guide us and mature what we thought in the first place. I think we have a diverse body in Christ for a reason. We have a diverse body in work because different people play different roles. And there
Hmm.
are certain times where people need to play the role of work forward in a sense of confidence in the task that's at hand, but also still be naming what they're seeing and feeling. And then as leaders, we need to be able to be humble enough to step back from that and say, okay, this was the goal, but where do we need to evolve this? What is
Yeah,
God revealing? Right.
yeah. And then there's also the nuance of working with people where, one mindset is if you set a goal that you can hit, you didn't set your goal big enough. The other mindset is if you set a goal and you don't hit it, you failed.
Yep.
And then you have that whole mindset to work through with people. And I was always under the mindset that, if you have a goal that you can hit, you didn't set it out far enough. And that causes conflict in a team, and just having that conversation. And then, okay, how do we scale back the piece that we're talking about to make that a digestible next step for to bring the whole team along. And that's been an interesting journey the last number of months. Is just, okay, how do we process that? Uh,
Right.
but yeah,
No.
there always is. If you're working with people, there's opportunity for, like, if you don't clarify what you mean, and sometimes you have to clarify what you don't mean in a conversation where, you say, or if I say something, two people can hear the same thing and get two different angles of that. And another thing that I've noticed already is somebody brings an idea or a question, and I ask them why they would do that, or why, instead of answering the question and just saying this is why, they assume that I interpreted that as a bad idea, and then they give to other people that I told them it's not going to work. And I'm like, I never said that. I just asked you how that would work or why you would do that, and instead of actually just having that conversation. And that's one thing I have to guard against is realizing that, if I do ask the question, it can come across as challenging the bearer of the news, if you will, to where they don't feel like their opinion matters or their voice matters.
Yeah. That's why so many of these dysfunctions I think fit together, and why
Hmm.
Patrick Lencioni is inspired in this writing and his leadership in this space, because trust as a primary example there, right? You can't properly create clarity with our teams unless you've established a sense of trust that
Hmm.
what you're saying is what you mean.
Hmm.
I think we all battle with that to some extent. For me, like, on a very personal level, I am the type of personality that my clarity comes from understanding. I want to invest very heavily in fully understanding, even in the areas sometimes that don't really apply to me, but it helps me see the whole picture and then helps me cast that vision out. So I know that I'm in a better position to lead when I'm doing that. So some of my goal on a personal level in clarity is to know what I need to do, and maybe even privately pursue my own personal needs for the sake of my leadership, but do what is necessary to be a good leader who's clear and is then building a network of ideas that includes commitment, that
Hmm.
includes understanding one another and being on the same page.
Yeah. And there's also a saying, I think it's Dave Kaufman has a saying, that clarity is kind. If you really want somebody to buy into a vision, or you want somebody to give it their best shot, they have to understand what's expected of them. And if they're putting in their best effort, and we as leaders come along and say, well, that's not what you were supposed to be putting your effort into, it really tears down trust. And just making sure that we are clear on what we're communicating. And that's probably one of my weaknesses, is to assume that the person that the task was delegated to understands what they're supposed, how to get it done. Because for me personally, the way I the way I work is, hey, if I jump into something, I'll figure it out. There's ways of figuring out how to do something, and my way might not always be the best way, but it's what I'm going to do until somebody shows me a better way or I figure out a better way. As long as my way works and I'm getting something done, uh, that's more the approach I would take. Is we're going to do a good version until we find the great version or we create the great version. Which, not saying that's always the best way, but that's more the way I tend to look at it. And I know some other people, they want to know everything before they get into something, but that's not the way my brain works. It's like, yeah, let's take that next step, and then we'll figure out that next step and we'll put that in place, and we'll, as an entrepreneur, building on the fly is not uncommon for me. It's like, okay, we got the airplane off the ground now. Now we need to put the other wing on and some of that kind of stuff. But no, it's been an interesting journey. It really has. And then working with people and seeing their gifts, and then their questions that come with those gifts. Uh, yeah, building teams. I'm blessed to work with a strong team around me on the leadership level that actually enjoys working with people and enjoys building teams. My
Hmm.
brother Steve does a lot of that and does a tremendous job with it. And there again, if we can have the what's expected in that process and the clarity between us, he can run with that and do what needs to be done.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and even what you just spoke to, right? Like we just both shared opposing views about how we like to understand something and work into something, right? But even that existing as a word, that existing as knowledge between us helps us work better together. It's, recently we've done here, I think I talked about one time before, disc assessments, understanding one another better and what personality type we have, those different types of things. It really helps us connect and work together better as a result.
Yeah. So yeah, any other comments we should get into here? We have a few more on the list here. What systems help reinforce clarity and decisions? As they come up. Is there anything specific you had in mind with that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for me, the stuff like that, even, I'm thinking very recently for us with using EOS methodology and implementing level 10 meetings and different things like that. And one of the things that we do to nurture clarity and then commitment around that clarity is that every level 10 meeting we repeat our core values for the organization, so that we know in the space of those meetings, at least this is how I use it and I work in it, that we know in the space of those meetings that when we're having debates, when we're having healthy conflict, when we are solving problems and all these different things, that we are doing so where we are at least aligned around these values and these commitments to the organization and to the reason we've come together in the space that we've come together in. So
Hmm.
that clarity helps us to frame trust because it's clear. It helps us to frame healthy conflict. It helps us to do all the things that allow us to more freely share and to hopefully build.
Hmm. Yeah, and one of the important things in building teams is conflict, and then in that conflict, different people can bring out their ideas as long as they feel safe to do so. And that's one thing I really like about the US system is if you don't have any issues on your issues list, then that's an issue because all companies have something they need to be working on. And as a team, what are the most important things for our team to be addressing right now, and then have everybody speak into that, and then as a team find the bigger answer than you would have found if you would have tried to do it on your own. So that's very powerful. When a team can work together and actually have the conflict that's necessary to find the clarity that's needed to move the organization forward.
Yep. Commitment through clarity means running head on at issues, not avoiding them.
Yeah. And as as the issues get solved, everybody gets stronger, company gets stronger, and then we build that next brick together, and we establish some core pieces of the organization that if down the road the issue comes up again, we can go back and we can see how we addressed it. Why is it coming up again, and then move forward.
Perfect.
So yeah, back to what I think one of the first things is said. What's the difference between having faith and having clarity? Sometimes that can be a gray line, and that can be a it's always good to have enough people around us that say, hey, well, what does that mean for the team? We throw out these ideas, and we're like, yeah, we're gonna go there, but then the question is like, okay, what does that mean for the rest of us? And then we have to dig into, okay, what does that mean? How do we break that out? How do we delegate pieces of it to bring the team along so everybody wins at the end of the day? So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well said. I think a good conclusion too.
Yeah. Any comments before we wrap it up?
Nope. We lack of commitment is a real thing. So I think leaders and even if you don't consider yourself a leader, the desire to find commitment and rooting it in clarity, I think is a healthy practice and something we can all work towards more and name among one another if we're lacking clarity that gets us there.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Chris, for joining us, and thank you all for watching online. Feel free to comment, like, share. There should be a link under the description if you want to send in questions you want us to address. We're happy to pick it apart and give our opinions on it. And if you disagree with our opinions, that's fine. We don't care. We're here to share insights, what we see. We're here to bring clarity. We're here to just uh, advance what God's doing in our life. And
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, if you guys don't get anything out of this, I know it helps me to learn to develop my speaking abilities of just sitting down and talking and just working through it. And but yeah, thanks for